Resetting how policies shape the customer experience is essential for a positive, satisfying interaction and ensuring that your customers come back time after time. By considering their needs in every decision that you make, you can create an experience that will draw them to return. But make no mistake, the rules you set can change how your customer feels about you when they use your service. So what's the right thing to do? Create a flexible policy that will impact your bottom line, or have stricter policies and manage on a case-by-case basis, which will inevitably weigh very heavily on your customer service team. That's the question of the day. My name is Ty. I'm founder and CEO of CX Collective, and I've been in CX for 20 plus years. I've worked from Fortune 500 to startup. And today I'm going to be talking with other members of the collective about policy, setting policy, the impacts of policy on customer experience. So we are going to jump right in. Who wants to go next with the intro?
Hi, go next. I'm Sasheen. I'm a customer experience strategist. I've worked with the collective for just over a year, and I also have about just over, I don't even know anymore. I lose count of the years, Ty. 20 plus years of customer service industry experience in various businesses from small to large in all sorts of customer and client facing positions. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of customer service operations, let's just say, and business policies too.
Gotcha. Understood. All right. Let's go to Jordan.
Hey, y'all. I'm Jordan. I'm a CX operations manager here at the CX Collective. I've been helping build and scale support teams through good and bad policies over the past 6+ years. Excited to talk to y'all today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Miss Chloe.
Awesome. Hi, you guys. I'm Chloe. I'm the CX operations manager here at the collective, and I've been managing customer service teams for about 10 years now in a variety of different industries. So I'm excited to share some knowledge with you guys and to also learn from you as well.
Beautiful. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in because, we like to talk about the real deal. Who here, and don't all jump in at once, but really you can, has experienced a policy that you thought was utterly ridiculous? Obviously, without mentioning any names, tell us about it. Who wants to go first?
As a customer, I ordered a product, think like a artsy, craftsy product that had like a collection of it was like in a plastic container. It was like sand, rocks, and different little things. It came just busted, like sand spilling out into the box. And so I needed a replacement. And I go to ask for a replacement, and they're like, you need to send this back to us. I'm like, I'm not going to go for this $20 product to the UPS store, send you a bag of sand.
Yeah.
What is this? Just give me, here's the evidence. I sent photos. And so I was able to convince the person to just go beyond policy and not make me do that ridiculous thing. But they should have anticipated that in the first place. That wasn't a reasonable request.
You gave that CX person a lesson. It's their fault that the product came damaged, not yours. So why inconvenience you for the replacement? You can't use it. That's ridiculous. Right. That's a good one. Who has another one to share?
I have a good amount of experience having to be in position of memberships and subscriptions and the difficulties trying to navigate when customers want to leave and the policy really doesn't serve them.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times that results in some sort of a monetary loss for them. And that's one of those very hard to manage policies as a customer, service person, because you understand, we've all had some sort of subscription, right? We've all, and especially nowadays with everything really being rooted in a subscription-based model, it gets very hairy when you're trying to just get out. And, there's companies that have really flexible policies on that. And then others that there's just simply no way out. And that's a huge struggle I've experienced myself, just with something as simple as having a phone subscription to a service, trying to switch, and then them holding, your money hostage for a month just because, even though you're not using it. And going as a customer, you know what I mean? And then also as, a professional trying to navigate those type of policies.
Gotcha. Chloe, you got any skin in this game?
I do. So there was this one company that was for a hair growth company, and their policy was no questions asked. If you need a reshipment or a refund, we don't need proof. There's no questions asked. So the problem with that was, as you can imagine, people started coming back for, within days of receiving their product and saying, it didn't work. Can I have another one? And then word started getting out, and people who never even placed orders with us were asking. And we'd be like, well, we can't find you in the system. It's okay. Just make a manual order and just send them a product. It's free advertising type thing. So it got really out of hand, and that got very messy, very hairy, if you will.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny because kind of tying in Sasheen's example and yours, I too have worked for a few companies that were based in membership. I mean, I don't want to say who, but check LinkedIn. And in both cases, you have this scenario where the valuation of your product can come down a little bit if you're in that space of always adjusting a rate. The product just becomes whatever the new rate is. But I've also seen, being on the front line, having the responsibility of answering the messages from people who want to cancel. Like the empathetic part of me is not really equipped to get into the battle of, I'm going to keep you in at any rate. I'm not, and I never will. And that's just what it is, right? So I think in that instance, I sort of went rogue, because if someone wanted to get out, I thought it was ridiculous to hold them to it, especially if there was like financial hardship. So I had run into situations in my past where people's accounts were overdrawn. Parents couldn't pay for formula for their children because they didn't know they were going to get charged and all of these things. So there's a part of me that's like, no. So my other question for you guys is, being in that position, all of us being in leadership, how do you get behind a policy that you don't agree with?
I kind of always gently still push back with the management to see if I can get some shared vision, because I come up, if I have to get their approval on some sort of a unique situation, I will continuously point out why.
Yeah.
And as the time goes on, I start to collect data, because a lot of times upper management knows numbers, not situations. And once you start to be able to monetize that and say, this is how much the company has lost because of this policy, or this is how many over month we've dealt with this. This is how much it's costing you. Then or it's gotten so painful that they're being dragged. You know what I mean? So it's unfortunate that it has to go that route. And some people still don't care because they're that strict on their policy, or there's another thing that is prioritizing that is keeping them in that policy. But I tend to have more of a continuous discussion to see if I can get any change. Because ridiculous policies are going to cost them one way or the other. It's going to cost you somewhere in the customer service team, just on their daily day-to-day activities and employee bankroll, payroll and all that. Or it's going to cost brand reputation, which then starts with, bringing in new clients. If they see that you have trash policies and people are dragging you on IG or wherever, it's going to carry. So I continuously have that discussion.
I had a scenario where I did the financials, and it was, even with the wackadoodle process, it was financially the right thing to do. Doesn't mean I liked it, but it made sense, dollars and cents. I think that is the right approach, is to quantify it where you can, to show like, hey, this could become a problem later on. The other part, and we talked about this last week, is the fact that CX we're expected to be magicians. So the policies can be complete trash. And even if the customer is dissatisfied with said policy, there's still an expectation that we uphold the policy and we make them very happy. Who has a story around that? Have you ever been able to do that? Like uphold a crazy policy but still end with a very satisfied customer?
On the team I was on, everyone was very happy. All the customers were great. They were so happy. We got another product. We get to try it again, but we were hurting. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the difference. It's like, well, when you're giving away free stuff, everybody's smiling.
Yes.
Yes. So that's interesting, because I wonder. So like when I think about why that leader might have said, yeah, it's okay to just send it. is that whatever the cost of said product is probably
Right.
the same cost that it would be to acquire a new customer or less.
Yeah.
So why not give them the product and make them cheerleaders? That's interesting. Yeah, sometimes you have to think out of the box. I don't know that I'm standing for it, just saying it's interesting. Do you have anything, Jordan?
Yeah, I've like worked with clients in the past who had very strict policies around like cancellation and trying to like hide how to cancel your subscription in the app.
Yeah.
And like they were strict on that policy, and it's just like it's very short-sighted, I think. I think like companies like want to maintain this like quarterly performance, but they're really like, I don't know what the phrase is, like missing the trees for the forest, where it's like
Yeah.
long term, you're just like setting yourself up in a very bad position with like all the negative reviews. Customers are going to see, like customers are smart these days. Like there's all these places you can go to like research, is a company like, do they treat their customers right or not? And if you get those bad reviews, you're done. And so, yeah, definitely seen that come up.
There are forums dedicated to like how to get over, how to get a discount on your membership, how to get your membership fee waived. In Chloe's example, probably how to get a free product. There are so many ways that people will get around it. I always think consistency is key, but obviously there's always that gray area. So most recently, one of our clients asked, I think over the last week or two, when is it okay to make an exception? And, you know, the easy answer is that, oh, it's case by case. But you know what I came up with, and feel free to shoot me down? You make an exception when it's your fault. Right? When it's your fault. Good example is what Jordan just said about he got the product, there's sand everywhere. Their policy is usually ship it back because I guess they think you're going to, I don't know, play with sand. I don't know. But ship it back. Okay, cool. But I can't do anything with this. And there's a, you know, the level of effort or the customer effort that goes into that. Like, does that make sense? I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think the time to make an exception is when you as the company is in the wrong. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. And I also think that there is extenuating circumstances based on customer situation that you have to be, you know, with policies, in my opinion, I think policies are there to set expectations and boundaries for everyone involved in the experience of purchasing a product or service. But there's discernment, you know what I mean? And there's just being realistic. And that's where the case by case kind of that exception flexibility comes in, where, you know, you don't want it to be a norm. And you don't, because if it becomes a norm, then you need to change the policy, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I've seen situations where it's extenuating circumstances, like you were saying, in a subscription that you can't cancel. You've got somebody that's like trying to buy baby formula for their kid, or they have a product that was delivered that they didn't get because there was a porch pirate, you know what I mean? And they've got the Ring video to send you and they were out of town. And those are the cases where you're like, okay, can we make an exception for this customer, especially if they're returning, you know? So it's those type of kind of the flex in the policy that I think scenarios come up in where you do, you know, make those decisions.
I agree with that. Does anyone have anything to add?
I'd kind of like love to hear all of your thoughts on like giving agents flexibility with policy. Like how have y'all incorporated that? Like either it's a budget of like refunds they can do per month, or something that just is like, here's the policy. We don't want you to go too crazy on one side, but we'll give you like some range of like what's acceptable.
I've usually painted the policy as, this is the policy. Here's a scenario of exceptions that we will consider. And here's a workaround to the policy. Because it's like you got to, especially when you start to see patterns in customer scenarios, like a good one is having a sale. And somebody has a sale for a short period of time. It could be a flash sale. It could be a week, you know, long sale. The person misses it and they're disappointed because they missed the sale. And the policies like are, you know, once the sale ends, the sale ends.
Yeah.
The workaround to that would be to give a discount code that they could use anytime around the year. That's like, hey, we're really sorry that you missed the sale, but here's this percentage discount on the product that was on sale, for example. So it's meeting them in the middle of, no, we're not going to honor, you know, we're outside of our policy. We're going to uphold that, but here's this workaround. So coming up with scenarios and strategies like that, I found to be, you know, the customer still may be a little disappointed, but there's something in there for them anyway. And especially if they have something that they can use throughout the year and still experience your product or service outside of what they were seeking.
That's good. You have anything, Chloe?
I think that pretty much summed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree for sure. I've seen where we've allocated, 10% that you can give because the customer was really sweet and wonderful, or 10% you can give because they had a less than stellar experience, whatever that may be. That flexibility is good. I've also seen where you provide tiered like options of what you can do based on like how the customer is reacting. So the customer is like, so because you know what, I'll tell you what I tell my mom, that if you're nice to your customer service person, they will do far more for you than if you're mean. So I tell her that all the time. I'm like, you need to fix your attitude, because you're calling this person, you're calling them because you have a problem, and the problem is likely not on them, right? Because they didn't pack the order in most cases. They didn't ship the order in most cases. They probably didn't even take your order. You might have placed it online and it came, and now you're upset and you want to reach out to them. They're going to be much nicer to you if you're nice to them. So I think that empowering the agents with like a dollar amount, what's acceptable. Let's say that a customer places an order and you have a policy by which you're not able to add to your order once it's placed. Most e-com businesses are kind of like, once it's done, it's done. So in that scenario, customer say calls in, chats, whatever. Hey, I want to add to my order. Sorry, you can't add to your order because we're not able to do that. But their new item is under the threshold. So empowering them to get free shipping is a huge win. The other thing is looking at the average value of that customer. So average customer value, like how often are they ordering from you or buying from you? What is it, like this one bad experience, is this going to break it? Is it worth it? Or should you just refund it? I'll give you guys an example that happened in my real life. There's a food truck that I love, and it's near a nail salon I was going to. And so whenever I would go to that nail salon, it was like right on my way home, I would always stop. But because their like prep time is like 40 minutes or something crazy, I'd always order like in the middle of getting my manicure. And then I would just head down there, grab my food. So I ordered the same way I thought I always did, but I didn't. Okay. I go to the truck to pick up my order. The guy says, we don't have an order from you. No, I have. It's right here. I show him the receipt on my phone, and I had ordered at a truck that was like 45 minutes away. And I was like, oh, shoot. And then he goes, well, wait, let me call. Let me see if I can do anything. So he calls, talks to the lady. I'm guessing she's saying no. He puts me on the phone. She goes, well, I'm sorry, we're going to lose the cost of the food that you ordered. It's very expensive, and we're going to lose that money if we remake it for you. I said, you'll be okay. And she goes, right, because that's something I would say, right? So she like, you'll be fine. And she goes, no, really, like it's very expensive. And I said, well, then I said, I come here every 2 weeks. Do you want my business or no? I own that I made a mistake. It's the only mistake I've ever made in dealing with you guys. Do you want me to buy from you again or no? Because we can decide it right here. Oh, I said, just, do the math. See if it's worth it. She puts me on hold. She comes back. We'll make the exception this one time. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I think enabling people to think about what, if this person, even, it got shipped to the wrong address, depends on the value. I get that. But is this person going to come back to you? Is this someone who's become a fan of your brand and wants to do repeat business with you? It's really silly to, nickel and dime them. Oh, we can't replace that item. What was it, $12? Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, if you do that, that person will become much more of a cheerleader for you. Up goes the net promoter, free advertising, more business, etc. My thoughts. Have you guys ever been in a space where you had to change a policy, and not just on the fly, but like change a policy moving forward because of customer feedback?
I like to shape policies around that because I really like to study the analytics of the customer issues and compare it to what's going on in the operations of the business and tie the relationships. Is this a product issue? Is this an operations? Is this a billing issue? What are the policies? How do we make this easier for the customer? What's the cost, proposition of doing these changes? And I've worked with clients that have done that. And a lot of times it works out better. They start to realize that they do the before and the after, maybe forecasting what this policy is going to do versus how much it's cost them, especially if they're in a bad space where they're getting a lot of disputes or chargebacks or bad reviews based upon their practices, and then they change it. And then I wait, and then I go, now you see how much easier, especially if it's a policy that if you just change this one thing, you won't even hear from these people anymore. That's the magical part of it. It's like once you make change, it's magical what can happen. We're still not magicians because this is on the operations.
Right.
But the fact that we are now in a position to be able to communicate a better, experience for them because the policy has changed, it makes a big difference,
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I have a situation in my past where essentially we were making customers reach out to us with to prove a bunch of information. They had to send screenshots, PDFs, all of this, and get approval. And we did that because and the customers realized we didn't trust them. It didn't show that we trusted them. We needed all this verification.
Yeah.
And it was also taking up our internal resources to verify all this information. And so I advocated for changing the policy to make it so we just needed a screenshot versus the 3 or 4 different things. And overnight, our agents were happier because they didn't have to tiptoe around the customer and be we need to ask for this. They felt bad asking for that because they knew it wasn't necessary and it didn't make the customer feel like they were valued. And so we immediately saw great changes in efficiency, customer happiness, agent happiness. And I think coming from a place where you build policies around trusting the customer and assuming trust really goes a long ways.
I agree. Go ahead, Chloe.
I was with a very, very high volume client, and it's sort of similar to what Jordan was saying. So the client would, if their app wasn't working, they would need to send us the proof. And I remember there was one customer who had sent probably over 100 or so units, pictures, PDFs, videos of proof. And I had to go verify it, and it took hours for me to get through. And everyone's just keep working at it, keep going. And I'm but you're taking me away from very valuable time that could be spent elsewhere. Yeah. And, luckily that policy sort of changed, and it eased a lot of pain for a lot of people. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I had an experience with a brand. I bought a foundation. You know how it is, especially during the pandemic. All of the advertisements, you have nothing to do. So just keep swiping and buying and having stuff delivered. So I order this item. It comes, it makes me look casket sharp. I mean, just completely grays me out. It's terrible. I was like, okay, no. I go to their return process to initiate it. And then I answer their questions at the end. They're like, we've just refunded you. And I was like, oh, that's so lovely. Right. I did feel trusted. I also know about, because we've worked with a few different beauty brands. They're looking into changing some of their policies. But I think that the concern is sort of what Chloe brought up earlier is if you introduce that no questions asked or that very fluid return policy, then it becomes abused. So when we think about building a customer-centric policy, what are some of the components that should go into that could still safeguard the company from abuse?
Hopefully there's reporting. And every company has a different way of reporting on what customers are doing or not doing. And if you've trained your team to have understanding of returning customers and what they're doing or not doing, and, a lot of automations and configuration goes into it, you can start to see a pattern of somebody that might be abusing or a bad actor. You know what I mean? Somebody that's not being genuine about the way that they want to return or they're trying to exchange. And so it's really creating a space where your team is educated and knowing what the signals are to be able to raise that as a concern. And, have the internal policies that could come into place, and still having, it's a little bit of a dance in a line, but it can be created where you can start to see very easily if somebody there's some sort of racketeering going on where you have, especially in high volume spaces, where there's something unusual happening in customer activity where policies are being abused.
I have some thoughts on that, but before I go, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I think something you touched on, Sasheen, that is also important is like when you're configuring your system, like making sure you have this valuable data like in the agent's view. So like in your food truck example, like I know you said you weren't the one calling, but if like you're the one calling the person, like they should immediately say, okay, this is Ty, they've spent this amount of money with us, like making that so easy for the agent to see. Like a lot of companies don't do that. And so that's like pretty foundational, but I think like a good first step.
Yeah. 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 Chloe?
Yeah, I think also setting boundaries when you're writing your policy on an agent level. Yes, there are exceptions. We can outline those for you, but there has to be like, say if there's a situation of delivered and not received. Okay, we're happy to reship it to you. But then again, if that second one doesn't go through, what are your boundaries? Okay, this time you have to either provide an alternative address or have signature upon delivery, or we can issue you a refund and you can buy it from the physical location if there is one. So I think also learning your boundaries is a very important part of writing that policy.
Yeah, I keep thinking about this one particular place that I worked. Even though they had some weird things, everything that they did still made sense financially. And it just kind of proves that money is the root of all evil, because it's like it still made sense. So I'm thinking about the abuse that comes with running kind of crazy promotions, having a kind of a high volume item be available for very little, and the extremes that people will go through to get those items, creating new email addresses, shipping them to friends and family, like literally doing whatever they can to get it. That usually kind of bleeds over into the fraud side of things. Like, there's fraud tools that help manage that. But have you guys seen any of that in your careers or in your time where there was some abuse because of a promo or something like that, and you like knew that person was up to no good because you saw their name in the system 8 times? Like, if so, how did you feel about that? What did you do? And did your company support you?
I've seen that a couple different times because of the way that the e-commerce platform was. You start to see that somebody's got the same profile under a different email address. There's no way to merge it. It becomes a bit of a mess. And they're trying to take advantage of a promotion. I think that promotions have to be careful. Promotion policies and sale policies have to be careful because you don't want to devalue your product over time. I think that when people get used to something being severely discounted like that, that's where people know that they can do these things. And then here we go. Or if you constantly have promotions going on, this is irregular. I have pointed that out, but I also pointed it out systematically. I did some root cause analysis on the e-commerce platform and was like, oh, this is kind of what we need to look out for if, we're going to do this. And then they were like, okay, and tried to get a workaround around it. And so I was supported in that space, to being able to catch those kinds of activities customer wise.
All right. Has anybody put into place any policies that they've later regretted?
I think discounts got a little crazy.
Yeah.
People started to feel entitled. Like if, especially returning customers, we would have a returning customer discount on some of the platforms I worked with. And they then felt like, well, this is just not enough and I need more. I've paid thousands of dollars into this business. And so you have those type of backlashes. So that can become a bit of a pain, but
Definitely experienced something similar. Like I worked at a stock investing platform, and one thing we could do if a user had a bad issue was like give them a free little slice of a stock. But then people would be like, what we would do is anytime somebody reached out with a feature request, we'd be like, amazing feature request, here's a free stock. So some people would like queue it up once a week and just ask about a new feature. And we just at some point we were like, we didn't have a great process in place, and like we had to reevaluate that whole premise because like we were just giving away money to people who were trying to game the system.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake that I would have made was going along with that no questions asked policy, because in that environment, I was not supported. So even when I did bring alternatives and like better ways to handle these situations, it was like, just stick with this. You don't ask questions, literally no questions asked from anybody. So I think that was something that's detrimental.
Yeah, I think one other thing that sometimes companies may miss is like when they're bringing in CX, they're bringing in representatives to speak to the customer on behalf of the business, right? And you hire for specific skill sets in certain areas. You definitely want somebody that's dependable and trustworthy and resourceful and operates with integrity. They have a lot of access to your business information. But when you operate in integrity, it becomes really difficult to uphold policies that are either dishonest or unfair to customers. What do you think a fair middle ground is? Because I have left companies because I couldn't stand their policies, right? And that might be an extreme. But if I'm expected to uphold it and I have to convince other people to uphold it, I'm lying to myself and I'm lying to them, and that's not okay with me. So what have you guys done to deal with that kind of crossroads?
I agree with you. I will eventually dip out if it's too much, because it's just not. I am hardcore integrity, so it doesn't. If it's not aligned, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of how I have to ride on work these days. But and in past times as well. But I think it depends on the business and their leadership.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it, because there's a lot of dichotomy on people who want to say they're customer centric, but then it's almost ironic and an oxymoron, because their business practices are saying something else.
Yeah.
And I think in environments where their customer experience is not great and their employee experience is not great, because they're also not listening to their employees, is like the indicators. If you can have a discussion and there's open dialogue where they have a policy in place to review their policies, because I think this is part of your systems review that you should have every year, is how are our policies playing out? What is our reporting on policy? How are our customers feeling about these policies? Some people grow exponentially and the policy they had is not the policy they need in the future or at that time, or vice versa. If they scaled back, they need to change their policies. And it's really about reviewing and making smart decisions about what's going to work best and staying customer centric, as well as empowering their team,
I know that there is a direct correlation between CSAT and bad policies, because the customer doesn't see the interaction with a person any different than an interaction with a brand. And I don't know why that's really difficult for people to understand. But when you talk to, like, if you think about the last time you called a business, or Jordan, in that scenario where you had the issue with your return, do you remember the name of the person you spoke to? No, but you know the company that you were dealing with, right? So that person inevitably becomes the company or becomes the brand. So when you get a survey at the end, how did you like your experience with so-and-so? It doesn't matter who so-and-so is. What matters is the outcome of that scenario. So I went to this event last week on Thursday, and one of the panelists had a suggestion around CSAT reporting that I thought was pretty good. And she said to break it up into controllable versus uncontrollable. And I was like, oh, that's great. Here I am, at this big grown age, and I never thought about that. Have you guys done that in your past? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's like CSAT is like one of my pet peeve metrics of like, it's such an important business metric, but it's not a good measure of how an agent is doing. Like there's so much outside of their control. I think I've seen studies that it's like more than 50% of the time it's like not related to the agent service. And so like having some other metrics to use, or like doing something, I think they call it like DSAT analysis. Like for the negative CSATs, you can like do essentially like a QA process of like, okay, what was the issue? Like what could we have done better? At one of my previous companies, I did implement that. So we would go through and review all of our negative CSATs. And yeah, most of them were not related to the agents, which feels good to me as like a support leader. Yeah. Doesn't feel so good as like a brand, but then it also gives that actionable feedback to the product team, to the other teams of like, okay, this is why customers are not happy.
I'm not going to give a plug, but there was a client that I worked with, and they deployed a survey. So it wasn't done in the, controllable versus uncontrollable, but the results had drill down. So if you said like you were dissatisfied, then the next question would be like, why were you dissatisfied? Till they got down to the root cause of like what really made that person unhappy. I had introduced that particular company to a few clients, But that's the kind, when you have to be ready for that kind of detail. It's not something that you're just going to do on the surface. I think they probably do better with like larger companies. But I thought that was a good idea to kind of get into it, because some of the feedback I also hear is that the CSAT scores are demoralizing in a lot of ways. Like the people who are actually engaging with the customers are feeling like, I can't make them happy. You know what I mean? And I'm doing my best, but I can't make them happy. I'm with you and Jordan on CSAT not really being about the experience with the person, because it's really about the experience with the company. I think I kind of lean more towards NPS because it's not an exact, right after an engagement, but it's kind of over time. And I feel like you might learn a little bit more, but I could be wrong. What advice would you give companies about how they're going to build and set their policies if they're looking to improve their customer experience?
I think be open to change, be open to opinions and feedback from your agents directly, because they're the face in between you and the customer. So their feedback is invaluable.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that there needs to be a practice of reviewing your policies and really figuring out where the metrics are around what are we measuring, kind of like a QA, like a QA for policies would be cool. That, brands and businesses kind of use throughout the year to see how they're doing and really compare that to like their customer reviews, their reporting that they're getting, and really be mindful about it. Sometimes there's nothing that needs to be said because everybody seems to be happy. But I think in times businesses change, they evolve. So it's just, there's a matter of time before something does need to change. And then, there you go. You already have that in place. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah. And I'd say in addition to that, like start with the customer first mindset. Like don't assume the worst of the customer. You can always change things later. Like if you see abuse, you can like tackle it there. But I'd much rather start from that position than start from like customers not having a good experience at all.
That's good. That's good. Now, I think my final question will be, what advice would you give to other people who head up CX ops who feel like they're in position right now to uphold policies that they cannot get behind? What would you say to them?
I would probably say come up with an alternative, because if you're going to bring opposing opinion to your company, have the alternative solution.
I would add to that, I think that's great. Quantify, right? Because as Hashim mentioned earlier, companies understand dollars and cents. And there have been times where I've done analysis on what something costs and literally had to tuck my tail and be like, they're never going to go for this because it's still lucrative. So what is the point? Yeah. Jordan, I think you were going to speak next.
Yeah, I was just going to say very similarly, like data is your friend. Like build your case and then come prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. Sachin, you want to add anything?
Also, I always like to take the customer use case and present it to management. And especially when you have one of those rogue customers that go and drag you through 7 channels. They were on the phone, they were on IG, they emailed us 15 times, and just build it around that situation with the data, and then also have the alternative.
Yeah.
Because they see it. Now it's played out. Now we have to deal with this 1 or 2 customers or crowd of customers, and we have to deal with it. And I really like to take screenshots and play back the recording and like the whole thing.
That's great. Yeah, personalizing it. So I think that the one way to get around they're never going to go for this is to let them hear, as you were saying, let them see, what you're dealing with. And sometimes you have to fall on your own sword. And I've done that before. I've refunded overdraft fees because it was the right thing to do. Right. And so sometimes you fall, I'm like, yep, I did it, and I did it because it was the right thing to do, because our policy is not fair and the process that we did is not right. So we should probably think of doing something else. That hasn't always served me so well, but that's been my position. So the fun part about being at CX Collective is we get to pick and choose who we work with, and we set our boundaries on whether or not we want to work with that client. So integrity matters a lot. So if we have a client who does not want to operate in integrity, then we're probably not a good fit. And that's okay. So I think in closing, just a reminder that having a good customer experience is basically what is going to create return customers. We already know that. That's why it's such a buzzword and a hot topic right now. But your policies really are the foundation from everything else. Your policies are going to inform your processes. Your processes are going to inform your SOPs. Your SOPs are going to inform your training program. And it all comes back to the policy. So make it very clear to your team what they're empowered to do, what they're not empowered to do. Create a clear escalation process. And to the point of everyone from CX Collective on this call today, be flexible, because there's theory and there's practice. You might think in theory that that's the right thing to do, but as soon as you see how it comes out, you realize that you need to do something different. So remain open to that. All right, y'all. This was lovely as usual. I appreciate you. All right. Well, then I'll see you guys next week for, I don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but we're going to find something. Maybe we'll just wing it. We'll see. But looking forward to it already. Thank you again for taking the time to do this. All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.